Here, I'll discuss 10 rules to help tighten your writing. Number 1. Avoid helping verbs. A helping verb assists the main verb in a phrase. Helping verbs normally fall into 3 categories: to be, to have, and to do. For example, I was walking to the store. The word was is a helping verb of to be. You can shorten the sentence by simply saying, I walked to the store. By eliminating the helping verb, you make the sentence stronger and shorter. However, helping verbs are useful when you are emphasizing that something is currently happening in your story. For example, I walked in, Mom was washing the dishes. Here you are saying that Mom is currently washing the dishes, but if you said, I walked in, Mom washed the dishes, this implies that you walked in, then Mom completed washing the dishes, and now she's done washing the dishes. Number 2, avoid passive phrasing. Passive sentences always have more words than active sentences. An active voice normally is recognized when the acting subject follows the verb. For example, I drove the car is active, but the car was driven by me is passive. In both cases, you are the main subject, drive is the verb. Notice how this example requires a helping verb. Sometimes passive voice is helpful if you want to emphasize the target subject by placing it at the beginning of the sentence. For example, despite being the same age, I looked up to Billy. He was my best friend. On December 2nd, 1989, Billy was killed in a car accident. The final clause is passive to pack an emotional wallet because the focus is on Billy rather than the car accident. Notice how the trauma wouldn't feel as powerful if the sentence was written as, on December 2nd, 1989, a car accident killed Billy. Number 3, get rid of filtering. Filtering is where you state the viewpoint character's sensory input directly, saying he saw, I saw, she could smell, etc. Instead, it's better to describe the sensed object directly and allow the reader to fill in the gaps that the VPC has detected these things. Instead of saying, she could smell the coffee in the air, try something like, burnt coffee perfumed the break room. A reader would realize that the VPC is experiencing the coffee scent at the same time. Another example, instead of saying, I see a dog catching a frisbee, just say, a dog catches a frisbee. Number 4, get rid of as many filler words as possible. Filler words are easy to avoid. Simply eliminate as many of these types of words as much as possible. This, just, so, very, really, that, of, some, like, totally, completely, absolutely, literally, definitely, certainly, probably, actually, basically, virtually, rather, quite, somewhat, suddenly, so far. Also avoid using these words at the beginning of sentences, and, then, but, yet, and however. For example, the sentence, the petals from sunflowers cascade, has from as a filler word. From can easily be eliminated by saying, the sunflower petals cascade. Another example is the bomb that killed him. That is a filler word and can be eliminated without hurting the meaning of the sentence. The bomb killed him. Number 5, eliminate as many modifiers as possible. Modifiers include adverbs and adjectives. There's a reason why people can be so hard on adverbs and adjectives, and it's because they have a tendency to be lazy. It's easier to modify an existing verb or noun rather than choose the best verb or noun in the first place. That doesn't mean that all adverbs and adjectives are bad, it just means that use them with care. For example, don't say, she wore a thick green loose shirt seductively. Say something like, a green sweater draped off her shoulder. Notice how the second sentence has more than the first sentence did, and in a more active way. Sweater implies thick, and by choosing the verb draped, you imply the sweater is a loose fit. You're showing the looseness while simultaneously showing the seductive nature that the sweater is worn. Plus, by forcing ourselves to trim modifiers, we use a stronger verb like draped rather than wore. Wore is fairly boring in comparison. Number 6, eliminate redundancies. This means to get rid of words that aren't necessary. For example, the murky swamp or I stand up. A swamp is usually murky, so it's redundant to call it murky, and when you stand, it's implied that you're standing up, so you don't need the word up. In deep point of view, it can also mean using phrases like to me and from me, or to him, her, and from him, her. If your depth of perspective is deep, then it's usually unnecessary because it's implied. For example, he approaches me. Me is redundant. Notice how you could say he approaches and it still makes sense. Sandy's eyes watered as she slapped him. Embers burned his cheek. She stormed away from him. You don't need from him, you could simply say she stormed away. Number 7, mixing dialogue tags with action beats. Normally dialogue tags and action beats are not needed at the same time. For example, I thought I told you to leave, Jim said, lighting a cigarette. You don't need Jim said because you already have the action beat of lighting a cigarette. Instead, you could write, I thought I told you to leave. Jim lit a cigarette. Number 8, make as few transitions as possible. Group similar things together. This one's a bit bigger picture, but it's especially useful for deep introspection. Sometimes when we're writing, we'll go off on a tangent and get ahead of ourselves. This forces us to go back to other thoughts in order to make a natural conclusion. I see it a lot with actions too. For example, he left the room and continued on the stairs. The guest would be here any moment. A second could not be spared for preparation. He entered the kitchen. You have two places of actions where you could simply group them together with no problem. The guest would be here any moment. A second could not be spared for preparation. He rushed downstairs to the kitchen. Number 9, use the shortest, simplest words necessary. This one's easy. Don't use the word pulchritudinous when you could just use beautiful. Also avoid esoteric words when there are simpler words available, like engender, which means to cause or create. Not everyone knows what engender means, and using it only risks that you'll pull readers from the story. This doesn't mean that esoteric words are bad if it's the only word to aptly describe your intentions. Just don't use esoteric words in place of known words unless it's for stylistic reasons. Number 10, trim down groups of actions. I normally see this with beginning writers. What happens is that they're too stuck in a movie mentality where they feel the need to direct the character's every move. For example, he leaned back in his chair and rested his hands against his head, placing his feet on the desk. After puffing on a cigar, he grinned with yellow teeth. This has too many action beats and probably isn't necessary. You could simply write, he reclined in his chair and rested his feet on the desk. Through the cigar smoke, his yellow grin stretched. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed my video on tightening your prose. I wanted to let you know of my current work in progress. It's called Empty Vessels and the link to it is in the description below. Please visit and subscribe. I genuinely appreciate every person who signs up for email updates on my novel. If you have requests for video topics, list them in the comments below and I'll add them to my queue. Again, I hope this video was enjoyable for you. Thank you.